We almost nuked South Carolina. The internet says it's true. Hey there, and welcome back to The Internet Says It's True, where every week we learn something that sounds made up but's really true. Part of the WCBE podcast experience. My name is Michael Kent. This is episode 153. I am currently still on the road. This is a rewind episode, but just like last week, I'm doing an episode that sort of ties into the popularity of the recent blockbuster release of the Oppenheimer film a few weeks ago. It's another nuclear episode. I want to thank those of you who have joined Patreon. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's where you can get episodes a week early and ad-free, plus access to a lot of fun stuff. I'll send you some stickers in the mail, all that. I'd encourage you to leave some feedback about the podcast. That's free. Anyone can do that. Just rate it and review it at Apple Podcasts. That helps me a ton because it gets more listeners and it helps me climb the charts. This episode was originally released May 24th, 2021.
Remember that movie Broken Arrow? John Travolta and Christian Slater? They were a couple of Air Force pilots whose job it is to locate some missing dropped nuclear warheads. It was a fun film. Well, it turns out Broken Arrow is the official term the military uses for an accident involving nuclear weapons. And in the 76 years since the invention of nuclear weapons in 1945, we've had at least 32 Broken Arrow scenarios. For this week, we're just going to be talking about one particular aircraft, the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. Even before the end of World War II, the Air Force had asked manufacturers to start drawing up plans for a long-range, jet-powered bomber. Remember, the airplane that really ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs in Japan was the B-29, a propeller aircraft. The United States never did put any jet-powered aircraft into combat in that war. It was still very early in the development of jet-powered flight. The B-47 was finally put into service in 1951. It was a swept-wing, sleek-looking bomber aircraft with 6 engines carried under its wings. And if I had to describe the problem with these aircraft, it would be that they suffered from growing pains. There were the growing pains of jet-propelled flight itself. While the aircraft was incredibly fast and powerful, it took a very long time to accelerate. The new design of the swept wing caused structural issues. New design elements like those swept wings and power elements like jet engines were being put on an aircraft that was essentially using outdated metallurgy and construction techniques, and there were a lot of limits on its capability. On top of that, it was a difficult plane to fly for airmen who were used to a 10-man crew. The B-47 flew with only 3. So every moment of flight, every issue, every warning was happening faster and with less men to tend to it. The slightest lapse in attention could now be catastrophic. Then there were the growing pains of a quickly growing Air Force. Ramping up mass production on the aircraft led to a few manufacturing issues. By the time they were produced, the existing refueling infrastructure didn't meet the demands of these new long-range bombers. They started retiring the B-47 just 18 years after it was introduced. To give you a frame of reference, the B-52 bomber was introduced in 1955 and has yet to be retired from the service 66 years later. So the B-47 Stratojet was a short-lived bomber designed to face a very real and serious threat of nuclear war. It was designed to carry nuclear bombs and could fly all the way to the Soviet Union with them. There were just over 2,000 Stratojets manufactured, and a staggering 10% of them, 203 to be exact, were lost in crashes. And when you look at the timeline of when this aircraft was in its peak duty, it coincides with the time when the aircraft started carrying nuclear weapons. That leads to the horrible events of 1957 and 1958 that we'll get to in just a moment. If you love listening to this podcast every week and you want to show your support, that would mean a great deal to me. You can do that by becoming a Patreon member. We've got members at all levels, whether you want to pledge $1 a month or $10 a month. Just think about the value that you receive from this show. And if you like the histories and the stories that you learn about or the jokes that you hear, and if you think that they're worth it, consider signing up. For that, you get every episode ad-free and a week early, access to bonuses like the unedited videos of the guest appearances, and 20% off all merchandise. You can sign up today at patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent. There was a time that humans used 100% organic products as healing balms and moisturizers for their skin. Well, I've partnered with an awesome company that wants to get back to those times. Fatco sells organic and responsibly made tallow-based skincare products. For centuries, humans used tallow in skin moisturizers and healing balms, but unfortunately, the topical application of these fats seemed to stop around the same time that animal fats stopped being considered part of a healthy diet. A lot of modern skincare products do more harm than good by stripping your skin of its natural oils. Let's change that. You can try them out now at fatco.com and get 15% off your order by using my promo code INTERNET. Go to theinternetsaysitstrue.com/deals for the link. Let's get back to the show. The reason we spent so much time learning about the B-47 is that out of the 32 Broken Arrow events in history, 9 of them involved this one particular aircraft. Now think back to what we learned about how short-lived this airplane's operational lifespan was. This gives you a pretty good idea of how dangerous it really was. And it's even crazier than that. Those 9 potential nuclear accidents happened in a period of just 3 years, from 1956 to 1958. And in 1957 and 1958, 49 of these aircraft crashed, killing a total of 122 airmen. As many problems as there were with the B-47, neither of the 2 stories we're going to talk about were the fault of the aircraft. In the dark early morning of February 5th of 1958, a B-47 crew commanded by Air Force Colonel Howard Richardson left from Homestead Air Force Base in Florida to conduct a simulated combat mission for training. It was carrying a 7,600-pound Mark 15 nuclear bomb. In airspace nearby, Air Force Lieutenant Clarence Stewart was piloting his F-86 fighter jet. He didn't see the B-47 on his radar, and at approximately 2 a.m., the 2 aircraft collided. With the wing missing from his small fighter jet, Lieutenant Stewart ejected and parachuted to safety in a swamp. For the B-47 bomber, their fuel tanks had been heavily damaged and were leaking fuel. Colonel Richardson didn't know if he could land the bomber without the nuclear bomb detaching and detonating. He made the choice to ditch the bomb in the waters off Tybee Island in Georgia. He was able to land the plane safely at Hunter Air Base in Savannah, but that bomb landed in the Atlantic Ocean near Wassaw Sound. And as far as we know, that's where the bomb rests, undetonated, today. Just over 1 month later, on March 11th of 1958, it was the middle of the afternoon in Mars Bluff, South Carolina, when 6-year-old Helen and 9-year-old Frances Gregg were playing in their yard with their cousin Ella. Suddenly, a whistle from the sky and a huge explosion. Here's what happened. Captain Earl Kohler was piloting a B-47E Stratojet, 15,000 feet in the sky over South Carolina. The crew was scheduled to fly to the United Kingdom and continue on to North Africa. This was part of an ongoing training mission to track the accuracy of mock bomb drops. Except the bombs on board were very real. Tensions with the Soviet Union were at a height, and the Cold War was becoming less cold by the day. For this reason, the aircraft taking part in this training mission, ominously dubbed Operation Snow Flurry, carried live nuclear bombs in case war broke out during the missions. The bomb being carried by Captain Kohler's B-47 that day was similar to the one lost in the Atlantic in February, a 7,600-pound Mark VI nuclear bomb. The first indication of a problem that day was when Captain Kohler noticed an indicator light telling him that a bomb harness locking pin did not engage. This wasn't the mechanism that held the bomb in place. It was an added safety measure. It was one of a few steps to secure it to the plane. When he noticed this indicator, the bombardier and navigator, Captain Bruce Kolka, scrambled to the bomb bay area of the aircraft to check it out. As he reached around the bomb to lift himself up, he accidentally grabbed hold of the one thing he shouldn't have: the bomb's emergency release mechanism. This dropped the full weight of the 10-foot-long, 7,600-pound bomb, along with Captain Kolka, onto the bomb bay doors. The bombardier desperately reached his arm out to grab onto something. The bomb, however, weighed too much for the doors. He looked down through the open doors and watched in horror as the bomb started falling 15,000 feet to the land below. The 3 children playing below at the Gregg house had no idea that the bomb was coming toward them. The Mark 6 nuclear bomb detonated 200 yards from the children. All 3 were injured, but none were killed. Luckily for those children, and for Mars Bluff, South Carolina, and for the southeastern part of the United States, the nuclear capsule was not on the bomb. The capsule, which contained the fissile nuclear core, was still on board the aircraft and hadn't been loaded into the bomb housing. Even so, that bomb was carrying enough explosives to blow a crater into the ground that was 70 feet wide and 30 feet deep. In addition to injuring the 3 girls playing, it obliterated their playhouse, injured their mother, father, and brother, and damaged 7 nearby buildings.
An atomic bomb breaks loose from a mounting shackle in a B-47 jet over Florence, South Carolina, plummets to Earth, causing a sensational freak accident. There was near disaster for those within range of the TNT, that is the bomb's trigger. 6 were injured. The home of Walter Gregg was turned into a shambles.
After the incident and the victim's recovery, the Gregg family sued and was awarded $54,000 in damages. If you visit Mars Bluff, South Carolina, you can still see the crater today. It's overgrown with trees and brush, but the site is marked with a historical marker. As for the bomb dropped outside Tybee Island in the Atlantic Ocean, throughout the years, the military has mounted efforts to locate the bomb, even as recently as 2004. But to this day, it's one of 6 American nuclear weapons that have been lost and never found. Now it's time for the part of the podcast where I call a friend and quiz them, and today I've invited podcaster and actor Michael Spedden to the show. Michael is the host of the Foul Players Radio and regularly appears as a member of the Foul Players of Perryville, a murder mystery troupe in Maryland. Michael Spedden, good to see you again.
Michael, it's great to see you. It's great to see you. It looks like things are starting to get back to normal, which is great for both of us. So
I'm happy to have you. You were on my show, Joke Story Trick, but you haven't been on this podcast on The Internet Says It's True. And the way that we do this is it's a quick 5 questions, and you don't know anything about it. Our listeners have just learned this, but I haven't talked to you about it. Then after this first question, we'll get to some stuff that's new to all of us. And each question we play for something. So for this first question, we're playing for a free podcast plug. So if you get it right, I'll give your podcast a free plug on next week's show. If you get it wrong, you've got to plug this podcast on your next episode. Agree?
Agreed. Most
Okay.
definitely. Most definitely.
Here's your question. There is a crater in Mars Bluff, South Carolina that, at the time of its creation, is believed to have been 70 feet wide and 30 feet deep. Which one of these was the cause of the crater? A. The Air Force accidentally dropped a bomb. B. A meth lab blew up. Or C. A meteor fell from the sky.
Well, down there, all of those are definitely feasible. I will have to go with the meteor.
I'm sorry, Michael. The answer is A. The Air Force accidentally dropped a bomb. Can you believe
Jeez.
it? And not only that, it was a nuclear bomb. Luckily, fortunately, it was not armed with the nuclear warhead, but it was armed with a ton of explosives. It destroyed 7 houses. It injured some people. No one was killed. But it's one of many accidents that we have had with nuclear bombs, and that's what this episode was about.
Okay.
So I get a plug on your podcast, your next podcast,
you do.
the next Foul Players Radio.
I will give you a plug.
And if you want, you can just tell them about your experience here on the show, and that would suffice. Question 2. For this question, if you get it wrong, you have to tell me about your most embarrassing gig as an actor. If you get it, you got one in mind?
Oh yes, there's.
Maybe we'll talk about him anyway. This sounds like a good story. If you get it right, I'll tell you a story about my most embarrassing gig, which was acting in a television commercial, and we'll get into that. The movie Broken Arrow with John Travolta and Christian Slater was met with mixed reviews when it was released in 1996. It was the only time that Roger Ebert got Gene Siskel to change his mind about a movie. Siskel gave the movie a thumbs up, but after hearing Ebert talk about it, he changed his rating to thumbs down. Even still, the movie was number 1 at the box office on its opening weekend. Now, this is 1996. Which one of these movies did it beat for that number 1 spot? So one of these 3 movies was the number 2 movie in 1996. A, Hunt for Red October. B, Mr. Holland's Opus. Or C, The Passion of the Christ.
Oh, I would have to say B.
You are correct. Mr. Holland's Opus. I tried to space these out because A was Hunt for Red October. That was 1990. That was 6 years prior.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah, and
I knew that it wasn't out that year. Yeah,
exactly. And The Passion of the Christ was too new. That was 2004.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, because there was another movie about the Passion or something that came out around that time. I think it was the Willem Dafoe one or something.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, I would have to look back at the charts. The 1996 Broken Arrow movie, it brought in $46 million, and that was the number 1 movie. The Passion of the Christ was the number 1 movie in 2004. It brought in $125 million. And The Hunt for Red October in 1990 brought in $72 million. So while it was number 1, 1996, $46 million, not a huge box office. And it was, like I said, mixed reviews on that movie. So you got that one right. I will tell you a story about my most embarrassing gig, which was acting in a television commercial. It was my first acting gig that I got. And I did not really know what I was doing. I had never done any sort of, other than magic stuff, I had never done any sort of on-screen acting before. And I was booked to play a construction worker in a cell phone commercial. This was for the government subsidized cell phones that became known as Obama phones. But before they
burners,
this was before they were called that. What they did was they would take like recycled phones and then sell them at really, really low prices to people who needed phones, which is an awesome program. But this commercial, it wasn't the writing. It was just bad acting. I was just not a good actor. And it may have been bad casting, but I did not look like a construction worker. When I looked in the mirror that morning, I was like, this is not gonna, and they dirtied up my face because they thought so too. So I'm wearing a hard hat. It was in a kitchen. I was coming home and I was wearing a hard hat, and that's how you knew I was a construction worker, and probably the only way. And when they dirtied up my face, the director said, nope, this is too much. So then they had to undirty my face. And then the whole scene in this commercial was almost like a domestic dispute. I came home and my wife in the commercial was talking on a cell phone, and I said, you ordered a cell phone? We can't afford that. And it caused like this fight or whatever. And then she said, relax, it's a government, or it's free or whatever. So this was on the internet soon after it aired, and I should have saved it, and I didn't, because I can't find it anywhere, which I'm so glad about. But at the same time, I would love to see it just so I can share it with people to show them how bad it is. It will never go on my reel. It is a horrible acting job. So for the listeners out there, Look for the cell phone commercial. The name of the cell phone company was Reach Out Wireless. So if you can find a Reach Out Wireless commercial, this would have been from probably close to 10 years ago. And of course, my name wouldn't be associated with it, but you'll see a construction worker yelling at his wife. Look for that. I would love it if someone sends me a video link to that. Question 3. The running prize for this question number 3 is always the same. It's one of these stickers that is a tell me what to Google sticker. Tell me what to Google is the former name of this podcast. And I ordered all these stickers before I changed the name of the podcast. So I'm trying to get rid of them all. If you get this right, you'll get one in the mail. In Goldsboro, North Carolina, a nuclear bomb was found buried in a field after a B-52 crash that happened in 1961. After it was discovered, which one of these solutions did the Army Corps of Engineers do to handle the situation? A. They carefully removed the bomb and transported it to an island where it was detonated. B. They removed the nuclear core and put the bomb on display at a local North Carolina museum. Or C. They purchased a 400-foot circle of land around the bomb and left it where it is.
I would have to say possibly C. I'll go with C.
You are correct. Unbelievably, all they did was fenced it off and left it there. This is from nationalinterest.com. Somewhere near Goldsboro, North Carolina, a uranium core is likely buried in a field. It had been one of the cores for a pair of 24 megaton nuclear bombs that were on a B-52 that crashed shortly after takeoff. What is especially unsettling about this incident is that 3 of the 4 arming mechanisms on the bomb that was recovered had been activated. So it's 3/4 of the way there. They just bought a 400-foot circle of land around the bomb, and they just said, it's staying there. We're not touching it. And that's where it rests to this day, covered by land. Nobody knows exactly where that is because they don't put it out there publicly, obviously, for obvious reasons. But that's how they handled that situation. You got this one right, which means I will mail you a Tell Me What to Google sticker, the much coveted dwindling supply. I bought 200 of these, and I think I've got 193 left. So it's dwindling.
Yeah.
It's dwindling.
I hear you on that.
Question 4. For this one, we're playing for what I call an audio Easter egg. This is where, if you get the question wrong, you have to say a phrase of my choosing somewhere in the next episode of the Foul Players Radio podcast. If you get it right, I will say a phrase of your choosing. The phrase of my choosing for this one is, quote, and that is a cup of coffee I will never forget. So that's the phrase you have to work into your podcast somewhere. If you miss this one, the quote is, and that is a cup of coffee I will never forget. So this one's a true or false question. True or false? In case you are exposed to a nuclear explosion, it's recommended that you immediately remove your clothes.
I would say true. And the reason I'm saying that is because they were looking at, like, when we were going out in the early days of the pandemic, they were saying when you come home to change your clothes. And I guess, there's the risk of carrying around all that extra radiation. That's my reasoning for saying true.
It's a good reasoning and correct. It is true. So FEMA has put out a series of instructions for what to do if you experience a nuclear explosion, which is surreal, first of all. You can go to the FEMA website and you can search for what to do in case of a nuclear explosion, and it gives you instructions. Along with getting inside a building, a 2014 version of their instructions say that removing your clothes can remove up to 90% of radioactive material from your body.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
So our clothes are pretty good buffers of radioactive material in the event of a nuclear explosion. I don't know how they test this stuff. I mean, that takes a nuclear explosion to know, right? I don't know.
Yeah. I guess the other advice they're probably saying is for some people is maybe shave your back and
shave your back, remove all body hair. It's probably true though, right? I mean, if clothes stop nuclear radiation, hair has to. It has to. So,
yeah. And I would guess that probably the farther away from the bomb, the more effective that is. Because I can't see if it happened right next to you even being there to have clothing, or your clothing not disintegrating on its own.
Yeah, the bomb does that for you. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And this is probably, if you're under the cloud of fallout that happens, it's a horrible thing to think about. But these are the things that obviously have been concerns frequently enough in our history that that FEMA has had to address it with some instructions. So
you remember in the 70s, there was that movie called The Nude Bomb. It was a Maxwell Smart movie. It was based on Get Smart. And it was actually a bomb. It was very bad. Well, but it had, Don Adams and Barbara Feld in it. And it was about a bomb that made everybody's clothes disappear.
Starting a question with, do you remember in the 70s to me? I have exactly 11 and a half months of reference of that. I was only alive for 11 months of the 70s. So I've never seen that though. I've never heard of it, but that sounds like a 70s, like a director or a writer of a movie was like, we need an interesting way to make everyone remove their clothes in a movie.
Yeah. And that was the Get Smart was a Mel Brooks show, but I don't think he had anything to do with this movie. I'm really not sure about it, but
I
know what you're saying about the 70s too, because I was alive for about 6 months in the 60s.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember any of that. I'm an 80s baby, so I was born in January of 1979. So
June of 69.
There you go. So do you have a phrase that you want me to say on next week's podcast? I will throw in an audio Easter egg of your choosing.
Let me see here. I learned how to walk and shoe Guam at the same time.
I remember that from this was your joke on Joke Story Trick.
That's it.
Perfect. I will put that in next week's podcast, the episode after this one. So listeners, listen for that. I learned how to walk and shoe Guam at the same time. I will definitely throw that in. You have gotten that one right as well. You are 3 for 4 on this so far, and there's only one question left, and this one is for all the marbles. Question number 5, if you get this wrong, I'm banning you from the show, never to be asked on again. Here's your question, Michael. What was the last great purchase you made?
The last great purchase I made was just a couple of weeks ago. I bought myself a MacBook Pro. I still have my 2008 Dell right up here on the shelf, but I got this MacBook, which is a lot better for podcasting and doing everything, because actually when I'm speaking to you right now, I don't look like I'm in a kung fu movie where you hear my voice and you see my mouth move 3 seconds later.
Yeah.
Actually, the delay's a lot less than it was, but I got this and things are a lot quicker. It's much better for my purposes, my recording and editing videos and audio for my podcast and everything. So it was a great purchase, and I'm glad that I did so.
That's awesome. We are not sponsored by Apple, but I run this show, and I ran Joke Story Trick off of a MacBook Pro. I absolutely love it. It goes with me everywhere, and I'm amazed at how that machine has kept up with everything I've thrown at it, which has been a ton of really heavy processor intensive stuff. And man, doing 90-minute shows, live streaming to 3 different locations with all this different stuff running, probably 10 programs running all at the same time. And it just never even took a breath. It was a trooper. So awesome. Well, it's been really great having you on the show again, Michael.
Well, thank you.
And you can come on anytime you'd like. I'm going to mail you a Tell Me What to Google sticker. I'm going to drop an audio Easter egg in next week's episode. I've told you my embarrassing acting story. Oh, and then you have to do a plug, because you went 4 for 5. You have to do a plug for this show in your next episode, because that's the only question you got wrong today. Thanks for joining us, Michael, and I hope that you have a fantastic week.
I will, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and likewise, you can come on Foul Players Radio anytime you like to. I'd like to get an update from you once the road opens back up and see how you're making out.
Thank you. Yeah, I will. I absolutely will. That is all for this week. Thanks to Joel for the show topic and to Michael Spedden for being a guest. Go hit that Patreon if you want to see the video unedited of my interview with Michael. There's lots of bonus stuff on there. I mean, we talked for a long time after we did the quiz. You can go hear all that at patreon.com/Michael Kent. Also, there's going to be a new bonus episode on there very soon. If you learned something that you didn't already know from this show, please go over to iTunes and leave a review with 5 stars and a few words. That's the rule. You got to do it. We've only got 30 or 40 reviews up there, and I would love to have, let's say 50 by the end of June. If we can do 50 reviews by the end of June, I'll be happy, and then we'll set the next goal. That's the rule. You got to do it. That helps me a ton because that's how the algorithm works, to get the podcast suggested to more people, and that way we can keep learning something new if the internet says it's true. The Internet Says It's True would like to thank the Patreon subscribers whose monthly contributions help to make this show possible. Sean Brown, Joshua Endress, Dallas Ray, Bryce Swanson, Eugene Anderson, Jim and Joanne Martin, Mitch and Andrew Joseph Kemplin, and the show's official Emperor, Kick Track. The show is written and produced by me, Michael Kent. The theme song is by Finite Music Forge, and all audio clips in this episode are used for education and commentary and used under Fair Use Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. You can listen to past episodes by searching for The Internet Says It's True wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see bonus content at patreon.com/Michael Kent.